There is a very interesting turboprop getting closer to beta for X-Plane 12, and if you enjoy flying something a little different from the usual Airbus and Boeing airliners, then this is definitely one to keep an eye on. RetroWings is making progress on its Fairchild Swearingen SA227 Metroliner, and according to the latest development update, the aircraft is now nearing beta. The Metroliner is one of those aircraft that has a really interesting place in aviation history, but it is also the kind of aircraft that doesn't get nearly as much attention in flight simulation as it deserves. In this video, we are going to take a look at the latest development progress, what we know about the aircraft so far, how detailed we can expect the simulation to be. Before we talk about the aircraft itself, it is worth briefly looking at the developer. RetroWings is a relatively new development group in the X-Plane community. But the people behind the project are not new to aircraft development. The team has connections to developers with experience at TorqueSim and Leading Edge Simulations, both of which have produced highly detailed aircraft for X-Plane. One of the names associated with RetroWings is Stephen McKenzie, who has also been involved with TorqueSim. While RetroWings itself may be a newer name, there is already some serious X-Plane development experience behind the company. And that becomes particularly interesting when we look at what they are trying to achieve with the Metroliner. What exactly is RetroWings building? The aircraft is the Fairchild Swearingen SA227 Metroliner, commonly known simply as the Metro. The Metroliner was designed as a small twin-engine turboprop for regional passenger and utility operations. And this is an aircraft that has a very distinctive character. It is relatively small, it's powered by turboprop engines, and unlike many modern aircraft, it requires the pilot to be much more involved in actually operating the airplane. That is one of the reasons I think the Metroliner could be such a great fit for X-Plane. We are used to seeing developers focus on large commercial aircraft, but the Metro opens up a completely different type of flying. Instead of long-haul flights between major international airports, you are looking at short regional sectors, smaller airports, and potentially some pretty challenging destinations. You could fly several sectors in a single session rather than spending hours cruising at altitude. And because the aircraft is so much more hands-on, the actual process of flying it becomes a major part of the experience. RetroWings first announced the Metroliner project back in 2024. At that point, development was still relatively early, with the team showing off the exterior and cockpit modeling. One particularly interesting detail from that early development was the fact that the developers talked about completing the 3D cockpit so that the system developer could begin bringing the cockpit to life. There has been dedicated work going into making the cockpit function as an authentic simulation. And now we are at a much more advanced stage. The latest news is that the SA227 Metroliner is nearing beta. For anyone unfamiliar with software development terminology, beta generally means that the aircraft has progressed far enough that the developers can begin much more extensive testing and refinement. It doesn't necessarily mean release is imminent. There can still be bugs, missing features, optimization work, flight model adjustments, and plenty of other things to deal with. But getting to beta is still a major milestone. Considering that the project was first announced back in 2024, it's encouraging to see it approaching that stage. And this brings us to probably the biggest question surrounding the Metroliner. Is this going to be a high-fidelity or study-level aircraft? Well, we need to make an important distinction. I haven't found an official statement from RetroWings that specifically label the Metroliner as a study-level aircraft, so I wouldn't want to make that claim as a fact. However, there are several reasons to be optimistic about the level of detail. The first is the experience of the developers involved. As mentioned earlier, the team has connections to TorqueSim and Leading Edge Simulations, developers that have produced aircraft with detailed systems and custom simulation features. The second is the way the Metroliner itself is being developed. We already know that systems development is a significant part of the project, and that is particularly important for an aircraft like the Metro. It's an older turboprop, and much of the fun comes from actually managing the aircraft. You're not just programming an FMS and watching the aircraft fly itself. A detailed Metroliner could involve a much greater level of interaction with the engines, propellers, electrical system, instrumentation, and other aircraft systems. The flight model will also be extremely important. At this point, I think high fidelity is a reasonable expectation based on what we know about the project and the developers behind it. Let's see what RetroWings actually delivers before putting a label on it. One of the things I find most appealing about this aircraft is simply how different it is. Flight simulation has no shortage of modern airliners, but there are far fewer high-quality simulations of older regional turboprops, and the Metro gives you an opportunity to experience a completely different style of flying. Imagine starting your day at a regional airport, flying a short passenger service to another small airport, turning around and then doing another sector in a short amount of time. The takeoff, climb, cruise, descent, and landing all come relatively quickly. And because the aircraft isn't particularly large, you can fly into airports that would never make sense for a 737 or an A320. That is where the Metroliner could really shine. It is an aircraft that encourages you to explore the smaller airports in the simulator. That makes it ideal for someone who wants a realistic aviation experience without committing to a 3 or 4 hour flight. The Metroliner isn't the only aircraft RetroWings has in development. The developer is also working on a Douglas DC-9, which should be particularly interesting for fans of classic jetliners. There is also a Learjet 45 project in development. But those are stories for another day. For now, the Metroliner is the project that appears to be closest to beta, and it is certainly the aircraft that deserves the attention. So, when will the Metroliner actually be available? At the moment, there doesn't appear to be a confirmed public release date, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. The aircraft approaching beta is a positive sign, but beta doesn't mean the aircraft is finished. A complex simulation like this can require a huge amount of testing. The developers need to make sure the systems work correctly, the flight model behaves as intended, and the aircraft performs properly across different conditions, and all of the smaller details are polished. So, I wouldn't want RetroWings to rush it. If the end result is a genuinely detailed Metroliner, I'd much rather wait a little longer for a polished aircraft than have it released prematurely. Overall, the RetroWings SA227 Metroliner is an aircraft that fills a very specific niche. It's small, it's old school, it's hands-on, and it offers a completely different experience from the modern airliners that dominate the flight simulation market. And perhaps most importantly, the development team appears to be taking the simulation side seriously. I wouldn't call this study level just yet because the RetroWings hasn't officially made that claim. But based on the developers involved, the dedicated systems development, and the progress we have seen so far, there is certainly reason to expect a high-fidelity simulation. And now that the aircraft is approaching beta, we are getting much closer to finding out exactly what RetroWings has created. Personally, I am very interested to see how this one turns out. What do you think? Are you looking forward to RetroWings Metroliner? Would a highly detailed SA227 be something you add to your X-Plane 12 hangar? Let me know down in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more flight sim news and aircraft updates, and I'll see you in the next one.